Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of Marvel's What If Season 2, Episode 9, the season finale, What If Strange Supreme intervened? Looks like Stevie Strange never learned any lessons from Season 1, so let's shake out his big toy box and break down all the Easter eggs, the cameos, the animation details, all the stuff you missed, and the deeper layer of meaning that this series is establishing about Nexus beings like Captain Carter, the Watcher, and God of Stories Loki. Now yes, I am easing back from my paternity leave to cover for Jessica on What If coverage while she's been feeling under the weather. But please go watch her amazing breakdowns of episodes 1 through 6, and huge thanks to the New Rockstars content team for their hard work on all of these. Jessica Clemens, John Costa, Gina Ippolito, Brandon Barrick, Noah Chen, and to all of our editors. Okay, the Marvel Studios title card has now been updated with all animated What If versions of these MCU characters' past moments. The first script line we see is I am Iron Man, and now credited to Sakaran Iron Man. And we see Tony's gnarly Sakaar Hulkbuster suit from episode 4. Then an image of the Freak version of Happy Hogan with his line from episode 3. Oh, I got Hulk blood pumping through me. Star-Lord T'Challa from season 1, episode 2. What if T'Challa became Star-Lord? With the line, there's an entire world out there, Baba, which he said as a boy to T'Chaka at the beginning of the episode. Bill Foster from season 2, episode 2, and his line, go big or go home. Kahorti from season 2, episode 6. Then, an interesting one, Red Guardian Alexei Shostakov. He never showed up in seasons 1 or 2, but he will show up in season 3 because Marvel, either intentionally or accidentally, released a whole scene in which there will be a team-up episode with Bucky Barnes and Alexei, and Bill Foster is going to show up. From that episode, I guess he is given a line here. I am the night, I am the wind. Then we see Strange Supreme, the villain or perhaps tragic hero of the series. And then Captain Carter is holding her shield out at us in the same position where normally in this sequence Steve Rogers is tossing his shield at us. We see her do that through the explosions next, and we see her script line, the name's Captain Carter. And I really love how all of these character designs get sketched into form before they are inked in, which is how comic books are manufactured. There is a penciler and then there's an inker. And continuing this Marvel Studios intro, the Marvel letters come together showing a ton of moments from this What If series. We see the Watcher silhouetted in the stars, Captain Carter in the very first episode when she charges in with the Howling Commandos. We see Jai training Hela from season 2, episode 7, Strange Supreme from season 1, episode 9, Tony on Sakaar in his armor as it transforms into the race car in season 2, episode 4, Kahorti from episode 6, Hydra Stomper Steve from season 2, episode 5, and Captain Carter when they were back to back, 1602 Hulk from season 2, episode 8, 1602 Merlin Wanda from that episode, Captain Marvel Carol Danvers from season 1, episode 7, Star-Lord T'Challa from season 1, episode 2, Carol and Party Thor fighting in season 1, episode 7, Zombie Scarlet Witch from season 1, episode 5, you can see her in the hole of the R there, then Ego from earlier this season in episode 2, Peggy coming out of the Super Soldier Machine in Project Rebirth in the very first episode of the series, Tony sitting in the Randy's Donuts donut from season 1, episode 3, the Grandmaster from the Sakaar episode, season 2, episode 4, Queen Ramonda from season 1, episode 6, Natasha with Red Guardian shield, that was from season 1, Howard the Duck from season 2, episode 1, Gamora from season 2, episode 4, Young Peter Quill from season 2, episode 2, Nick Fury, Carol Danvers, Bucky Barnes, Ultron Infinity from the final 2 episodes of season 1, or that might have been from his cameo at the very end of episode 7, and Strange Supreme, and then a very quick flash of zombie Steve Rogers from season 1, episode 5. Okay, so the Watcher brings us back to the end of last episode, London, 1602, where Captain Peggy Carter was stranded after restoring this timeline and purging all the Marvel characters who were transported to Elizabethan England after Steve Rogers ruptured Thanos' time stone. The Watcher reminds us of Peggy's journey from the first episode of the series, defeating Hydra in World War II, going through the portal to the present, and the events of season 2, episode 5, leading to an alternate Avengers lineup and fighting through the Red Room trap in that Russian town, and joining 1602 Steve Rogers in the most recent episode. But it's interesting how the Watcher is shown behind the thick, dusty glass of this pub window, while Strange Supreme is on the inside, bringing their ale into single malt whiskey, because remember last episode Peggy said that she preferred whiskey, and this was like the drink that she and Skinny Steve shared in the very first episode of the series. And changing drinks is a common parlor trick for Doctor Strange. Remember, he refilled Thor's beer in Ragnarok, and he turned Christine's water into wine in Multiverse Madness, but Strange is really manipulating Captain Carter. The Watcher is on the outside looking in, helpless to stop him. Now, season 1, episode 4 ended in bleak tragedy for Strange Supreme. It was a cautionary tale. And remember, season 1 never really resolved that. Even though Strange helped the Guardians of the Multiverse stop Ultron and Killmonger, none of that really healed his heartbreak. His grief has just gotten worse and worse ever since then. Strange asks Peggy if first run Shakespeare isn't enough, reminding us that yesterday's 1602 episode might have been a specific destination nearby Loki, god of stories, to target the time the most influential storytelling in the English language was being composed by William Shakespeare, and to allow Loki to play Hamlet and play Iago, and misplace the Skull of York to an earlier scene from Act 5 to Act 3 in order to stress Memento Mori. The Watcher catches us up with the events of Strange Supreme from Season 1, Episode 4 and Episode 9, reminding us that Strange Supreme destroyed his soul and his sanity to try to spare Christine Palmer's life, and the Watcher says,
"Now, two legends must band together to face a threat unlike any the multiverse has ever faced."
But the threat is not Cohorty, it's Strange himself, or rather the darkness that he allowed to overtake him back in that episode. As in WandaVision, the greatest danger is truly... No, not today, Mephisto. The greatest danger is truly grief itself. Strange brings Peggy into his sanctum infinitum. These looming walls and high ceilings remind us of the lost library of Cagliostro in that Season 1, Episode 4 episode, but if it were redecorated by a goth into this kind of dungeon. Imprisoned here are various universe killers that Strange has captured. In a sense, he has become something akin to the Collector or Miguel O'Hara in Across the Spider-Verse with his captured canon-breaking villains. Our first glance at the imprisoned universe killers includes Ultron Infinity, that gnome that Strange absorbed in Season 1, Episode 4, a version of Thanos, the Collector from Season 1, Episode 2, remember when he was like super jacked, what seems to be a gunslinger cowboy Loki that we get a better look at later, Wenwu from Season 2, Episode 7, and Hela, but this is not the white armored goddess of light Hela from the end of Season 2, Episode 7. This Hela is still in her dark armor and headpiece. And then on the opposite wall, we see a super armored version of Rocket that we see later. There's the young Peter Quill from Season 2, Episode 2, an armored Hulk that we see later in this episode, a version of Corvus Glaive from Thanos' Black Order, and a version of Thor. Now you have to imagine each of these characters come from some home universe where they just became the most powerful god being. Like Armored Hulk may be someone who, through the events of Thor Ragnarok, killed Thor and then overtook Asgard and was like worshipped as like the all-father of this universe. Corvus Glaive, I assume, is someone who stabbed Thanos in the back and then took the Infinity Gauntlet for himself. This version of Rocket might be someone who invented a gun that could just destroy any god-killing weapon so that he would have the only god-killing weapon. And then I guess just a cowboy Loki. Now Peggy correctly guesses that Strange Supreme let one of these universe killers escape.
Gremlins, aliens, Jurassic Park. Collect enough dangerous, well, anything, and something always escapes.
Yeah, Peggy is working through more of her pop culture reference list after referencing Flux Capacitor last episode, and it's worth noting that all three of these movies involve finding egg sacs of the species. Peggy's singling out movies that involved Easter egg hunting, and I love it! Strange turns this dial with runes and a window of portals open, and this seems to be Strange's rotunda of gateways. Remember the portal room that exists in the Sanctum Sanctorum? He swipes to the South Dakota Badlands that look like they've been ravaged by a wildfire, but now it's winter. And Strange promises that after Peggy finds the universe killer, he'll send her home, but he says,
"Cross my heart."
Yeah, Peggy should suspect this because this Strange has no heart. In this burnt forest of South Dakota, Peggy sees that Mount Rushmore has been defaced so that only Red Skull is there, which is especially haunting because Red Skull was Peggy's first villain in this What If series. And it kind of reminds us of Superman 2, when General Zod and his crew reshaped Mount Rushmore and just wiped off Lincoln's face because they didn't want to share it with him. The Watcher explains that the explosive that was there in Project Rebirth in the SSR station, that Hydra assassin detonated, the events that led to Peggy Carter becoming a super soldier, that now that explosion killed both her and Steve, that would allow Red Skull to be able to use the Tesseract and conquer the world. But in this case, it's especially tragic for Cohorty to see South Dakota ravaged this way by a European invader empowered by the Tesseract, which would have been the same instrument that gave her power, and that she just wasn't there in this history to stop him. Cohorty zips through the snowy trees. That reminds us of Quicksilver zipping around the Avengers in the opening of Age of Ultron and Sokovia. Cohorty attacks, but Peggy tries to repel her with the shield, but then Cohorty just catches the shield the same way the Winter Soldier catches Steve's shield in Captain America Winter Soldier, and Cohorty says,
"That delusional or that honored us is lying to you."
I assume this term is a Mohawk insult, as nearly all of episode 6 was in the Mohawk language, and that was just so cool to see them commit to that. But it's interesting now that Cohorty can speak English, which might mean that like over the years she was able to pick up the language pretty quickly. Can't imagine she would have let the British colonize the Americas in her reality, and I just don't really know how long Strange Supreme was chasing her. I think our girl's just pretty smart. Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. You can love holiday season and also admit that it's stressful. Travel, time with family, marking time with New Year's, it can be a lot. And if you feel like you could use a little help with it all, try connecting with a licensed therapist by using BetterHelp. Starting therapy can be hard. The right therapist for you may not be in your area, and some people struggle with the face-to-face interaction of therapy. With BetterHelp, you can have your therapy sessions as a phone call, as a video chat, even via messaging if you prefer that, whatever is the most comfortable version of therapy for you. Just click the link in the description and answer a few questions about what you're looking for from therapy and what your preferences are. BetterHelp will then match you with a therapist from their network that's that's right for you. If you don't really fit with that therapist, which is a common thing with therapy, you can easily switch to a therapist for no additional cost without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. If you think that you might benefit from therapy, consider BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/newrockstars. Clicking that link helps support this channel and also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp so that you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. Strange drops both of them back into the sanctum, and Cordy reveals that he is feeding both universe killers and righteous heroes into this forge.
Strange isn't trying to save universes. He's trying to resurrect his universe.
And under this, you can hear Michael Giacchino's Doctor Strange theme, but it has a more sinister upturn in the second measure of it. And we see why last episode included the tragic reminder of Peggy's loss of Steve Rogers. Strange Supreme hoped that that loss would make Peggy Carter sympathetic to Strange's plan to bring back Christine Palmer at any cost. But Peggy resists, and she sees more prisoners on the wall, including that gunslinger cowboy Loki that we saw before. I assume he's one of the righteous heroes that Cordy mentioned, because I don't think this guy is killing any universes. We see this interesting sorcerer with the time stone on his chest, and it kind of looks like the Collector, but there is a different version of the Collector, so I'm not sure if this is like the Collector or Odin or a version of Thor. It's kind of hard to tell. Then we see Happy, the freak Hogan. There's also a version of Howard the Duck, which is fun, and also an adult Star-Lord, either Peter Quill or T'Challa, with either the portal tentacles from season 1 episode 1 or probably just the extensions of Ego's expansion from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. We also see the Great Protector Dragon that we saw in Talo and Shang-Chi that came back in episode 7 of this season. And so she unleashes these prisoners, and I love using this tactic because it reminds me of the third act of The Cabin in the Woods, when all the iconic horror monsters were unleashed from their cages, creating this prison riot through which the heroes could escape. So along with the ones that we mentioned earlier in this video, you can also see a Chitauri soldier. Vision is there. There's definitely the Collector from season 1 episode 2 when he was super jacked. There's Cull Obsidian from Thanos' Black Order. Later this episode we also see Proxima Midnight, so I think all 4 members of the Black Order are there. Captain Marvel is there. There's an Asgardian soldier. There's a white-haired Wenwu in Warriors from the Ten Rings. Korg is there. That little gnome that I talked about is there. And then Armored Hulk, who seems to be in Asgardian armor. There's the Rocket I talked about before. There's one of the Dark Elves that we saw in the Collector's Vault, and he's from Thor the Dark World, and in What If season 1 episode 2. There's a whole bunch of Skrulls who are there. And then I think you can see the back of Drax fighting Hulk at one point. So they run away and they turn another corner and run into Zombie Scarlet Witch from season 1 episode 5. When Zombie Wanda flies up to fight Cohorty, the bearded zombie behind her kind of looks like Robert Kirkman, who is a comics creator of Marvel Zombies and a producer on the upcoming Marvel Zombie show whenever Marvel gets around to that. And of course the guy behind The Walking Dead and Invincible. All these zombies' eyes switch from Wanda Red to Hela Green as Hela rides up on the wolf Fenris. Hela used the same spell to resurrect the dead warriors in Asgard and Thor Ragnarok, and like Loki loves to do, Hela demands them to kneel. But Cordy says that the last woman to demand that from her regretted it, recalling Queen Isabella back in episode 6. Surtur returns, voiced as always by Clancy Brown. Remember, it was Surtur who kills Hela in Thor Ragnarok, so Hela cannot help but refocus her attention on him. So Cordy and Peggy run into, Thanos, who prepares to use all 6 Infinity Stones, but because What If never lets poor Thanos actually use the 6 stones, someone else snaps and dusts him away, and it is
Killmonger.
Yeah, they bring back Killmonger's music from Black Panther. We see his stone-empowered armor made of vibranium. We saw Killmonger wearing this at the end of season 1, episode 9, the finale. So Cohorty just uses her space manipulation powers to pull Killmonger out of that suit and then portal him away to the rest of the melee, where now we see 2 versions of Thor both leaping toward each other with their own respective Mjolnirs. Peggy touches Killmonger's armor and the stones transfer to her, leading to an insane third act of this episode where they just keep upgrading their power sets and their toys. So they head into the forge, and that forge looks like electron rings of an atom, or maybe that wormhole device from the movie Contact that I always bring up in videos. Peggy uses the Power Stone to strengthen her shield. Strange unleashes those serpent heads that he used in battles last season. Peggy continues to use the Power Stone to bind the serpents around Strange and absorb his next attacks so that she can redirect that energy into the forge. Next, Peggy uses the Space Stone for her shield, teleporting it around Strange, but Strange is able to get one step ahead of her. So Strange uses the Images of Icon spell, like when he battled Thanos in Infinity War, creating duplicates of himself, but Captain Carter uses the Reality Stone to mirror that spell. And the 2 sides war it out until Strange waves his hand, turning the duplicates into butterflies, which is a kind of transfiguration spell that we also saw him use on Thanos' attacks in Infinity War. So Peggy is transported back to her original What If moment in the first episode of the series in Project Rebirth of the SSR, when Abraham Erskine asked if she'd be more comfortable in the booth, which was the single question that put her on her new life path. But Peggy sees a butterfly, and Steve says, "I love you." And I think it's that "I love you" that that tips Peggy off, because Steve never would have said that this early to her. He was much too polite. So like the reality spell that Wanda Maximoff cast over Doctor Strange in the Orchard of Multiverse of Madness, this is just another smokescreen. So Strange opens portals to drop the prisoners into the Forge, including Cohorty's friend, a Tarax from episode 6. So Cohorty tries to lift everyone back up into newly blue portals to take them home, but this leads to a kind of up and down tug of war. Peggy freezes it and tries to reverse the descent using the Time Stone, but Strange, remember, also has a Time Stone. It's still in his Eye of Agamotto. That's really what led him to go crazy in that episode. So now all the universe killers are dropping and they take pity on Peggy Carter. Hela tosses her antlered helmet and she screams, "Give him hell!" And this time, hell in the closed captions is spelled with just one L. So it is the true Asgardian afterlife. Others donate a Mjolnir, the 10 Rings, Hulk's Supreme Sword, which I'm going to assume is the Allfather, Thor's vibranium sword that we saw last episode. And among these weapons is Odin's spear, Gungnir. Cohorty takes the rings and Mjolnir, Peggy takes the helmet and the sword. Each of these hits revert Strange into that monstrous form that he took late in season 1 episode 4, when his eroding soul gave way to this demon monster who just used Strange's appearance as kind of a skin. That was just a spell that version of Strange was casting to not scare people as much. That demon has been his dark passenger all this time, and that demon's name is Grief. This monster absorbs each of the powerful weapons. He takes Gungnir into his palm and it leaves a smiley face. He eats Mjolnir, the Infinity Stones get knocked loose, and Peggy leaps at Strange, seemingly empty-handed, to lower his guard, but Cohorty flings the stones into her fist at the last second so that Strange doesn't see the punch coming. So Strange admits,
My grief is too strong.
grief is too strong. But at that monster's grief, what did Vision tell us grief truly is?
But what is grief, if not love persevering?
Grief equals love persevering. So Strange is able to detach himself from this dark passenger by letting go of his love for Christine Palmer. To truly love someone is to let them go. And he chooses to love Peggy and Cohorty and the rest of the multiverse even more by dragging himself down with his grief down into the Forge. The Watcher takes Peggy into his 5th dimensional viewing gallery and they see Christine in Central Park during the autumn in this reality where Strange was never born. And this butterfly with teal and purple wings lands on the Watcher's finger. Now the butterflies that Strange used earlier were pink and red colored. This butterfly's colors are not random. Green turning into teal, turning into purple, are the same colors of the Yggdrasil tree that the Watcher unveils to Peggy.
Oh, Captain. Just you watch.
I cannot believe that we are seeing this image in a Marvel title after we first saw this image just like 2 months ago. It's actually happening. 2 different Marvel Disney Plus shows are actually comparing notes and communicating with each other. Yggdrasil was the new shape of the temporal loom that Loki created in the final episode of the Loki series, which was a way for him to organically weave and wholesomely maintain the time stream without having to violently prune it. And he did this at the cost of his own happiness. This is where the Watcher leaves us and guides Peggy Carter. That bright green spot at the center, that is God of Stories Loki right in there. He's keeping the porch light on for us. This tells us that God of Stories Loki is not as alone as we thought. He and the Watcher are sharing responsibility as meta beings, as Nexus beings, working together to keep the multiverse in this healthy state. We are seeing a joining of the live action and animated sides of the MCU in a current multiverse saga and setting the stage for Avengers 5 and Avengers Secret Wars. We're seeing, I think, one of the teams forming, Team Loki, that's going to include Loki, the Watcher, and Captain Carter. If the MCU is building a battle world landscape, I think at the center of that field is going to be Yggdrasil. That's the flag that both teams are going to be trying to capture. And I think this butterfly with Yggdrasil's colors was God of Stories Loki's way of welcoming Captain Carter to the team. And thanks again to the new Rockstars team for letting me spend December with our baby boy. Feel better, Jessica. I cannot wait to talk about all of this insanity with you on New Rockstars in 2024. And I want to thank all of you watching for spending time with New Rockstars throughout 2023. I'm just so grateful to still be here doing this. Please subscribe to all 3 of our channels and you can support us with some exclusive merch from nerdriot.shop. Follow me at EA Voss and I'll see you all soon. Bye everybody.